in case you were wondering, not Ishmael, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you. Now, the next two words to me are what show that Abraham had a supernatural amount of faith. The next two words are, so Abraham. Now, if God had said that to me, Mike, I want you to take Joseph, your son, your only son, who you love, and I want you to take him and I want you to sacrifice. My first words, the next two words would not have been, so Mike. It would have been, then Mike ran like a dog. Then Mike began to go, God, you don't understand. God, he had supernatural faith because he just like, yes, Lord. Here I am. Yes, Lord. Okay, so one trademark of faith, a faith person, is obedience. God said it, I'm going to do it. It may go against conventional wisdom, though. But a faith person goes, well, you know what? I'm not dealing with conventional wisdom. I'm dealing with supernatural wisdom, and I don't really always understand supernatural wisdom, but if God says to go, I'm going to go. You have to be sure it's God, of course. But one trademark of faith is obedience. So then let's look at what happens next. Genesis 22, 4 and 5. On the third day, Abraham raised his eyes and saw the place from a distance. He and Isaac are going, and they've got everything, and they've got a couple of servants. Abraham said to his young men, the servants, you stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go over there, and we will worship and return to you. We will go, we will worship, we will return. So Abraham's speech, he spoke what he believed was going to happen. I'm going to be back, and I'm going to be back with Isaac by my side, alive and well. I'm going to do this thing that God has told me to do, but I know that God ultimately said what he was going to do through this little boy, and so there's no way I'm coming back without him. I'm coming back with him. His speech lined up with what he believed. Okay? So another trademark of faith. A person, their speech matches their belief. Why did Abraham believe that he and Isaac would return? Well, in Genesis 17:19, it says this. God said, no, but Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with Isaac for an everlasting covenant for Isaac's descendants after him. Okay, at this point, Isaac's like maybe 13. Maybe 13, whatever. Isaac has not had any descendants, so Abraham is not thinking, well, all of Isaac's kids back there, he's already got kids, so if he dies up on Mount Moriah, it's no big deal because his descendants are already here. He was thinking, no, God said this boy is going to have descendants beyond what we can count. He's basically going to be the father of an entire nation. And so if that's what God spoke about this boy, I believe what God spoke about this boy, and I believe this boy and I are coming back. So number one, you're obedient, and number two, your speech lines up with your belief. I believe God is going to do what he says he's going to do. Well, but what if it doesn't look like he's going to? He's God. God can go back and spin it around again. God can do whatever he wants to do. God is not hampered by my bank account, my car, my water heater. Yes, my water heater broke during last Monday. And then Wednesday morning I got up and I hear, tss, and I'm thinking, did somebody leave their phone on? It's a noisemaker. And I go into the house and there's just this one pipe way far away from, I'm sorry, I've gotten distracted here, but way far away, and it's shooting straight up, and it's really nice hot water. And apparently, the new wine, old wineskin, apparently it just did that. And I crawled under there, and but then I began to thank God. It's like, God, if it had been pointed down and not up, I would have never heard it. But I heard it because it was hitting under our floor in our kitchen. And then number two, I would have heard it. The other thing was, it was warm water. I would have hated to have been under my house trying to fix patch of pipe that was blowing ice cold water. But it was like God warmed the water for me so that as I worked under them, I was like, this feels really nice. I won't have to shower today. God can do whatever he wants to do. And sometimes in the midst of the things that go wrong, You need to look for what went right in the thing that went wrong. Sally's battery. So Wednesday, we're getting ready for student ministry. She FaceTimes me because, Sally, that's the best way for her and I to communicate. That way I can read her lips. And she's like, my car won't start, and I'm at the Chick-fil-A in Gallatin. I'll be there in a minute. I get in my car. It's Wednesday night. It's traffic. Get there. It rains. She has the windows down. It's raining on her. It's raining on me. And I said, here, take my car. Go get Julia, and then you can, get to youth, and we're gonna be right there in the Walmart parking lot. I'll walk into Walmart. I'll buy a battery. Walmart was like, no, man, we'll come out there. We'll jump it. You can drive over here. We'll put it in. Again, it's like, I literally, when I got off the phone, I have to say, part of the reason my hand hurts today was when I hit the desk saying, Satan, that is just enough. But even in the thing that went wrong, because imagine if I got a text right now from Sally in Pigeon Forge going, my car won't start. I'd much rather drive to Gallatin in the rain than have to drive to Pigeon Forge and deal with that. God is good. Even when things go wrong, he makes those things happen in that are right. Okay, that was a real sidetrack. I will try to stay more online. 17 through 19. Sarah will have a child. His name's going to be Isaac. My covenant will be with Isaac. So another trademark is remembering God's promise. So you're obedient, you speak what you believe, and then you remember what God said. You remember God's promises. And as Christians, we have a lot of good promises. Then Genesis 22:8. We were in Romans so long, I think everything's Romans. Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. So the two of them walked on together. Isaac's carrying the wood. Abraham's carrying the knife, and he's carrying the torch. And Isaac looks up and said, Dad, where's the sacrifice? Son, God will provide. That's another trademark, is you believe that God is going to provide. When a faith person doesn't care about what's in the bank, a faith person doesn't care about the tools that we have in the belt, the faith person goes, this is what God says, and so it's going to happen. Well, how's it going to happen? That's not my job. My job is to believe that it's going to happen. You craftsmen are going to make it happen. You're going to figure out how to make it happen. So another trademark is believing in God's provision. And then Genesis 22:11, and I love this. But the angel of the Lord called on him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. So Abraham, he has walked up there. They've built the altar. They've laid the wood on the altar. They've done everything. And then Isaac must have had a lot of faith in his dad. He lets his dad tie his hands, and then Abraham sets Isaac up on there, and he's got that sword. Now, the sacrificing dagger or whatever it is, and the whole time though, Abraham's going, any minute now, any minute now, any minute now. God, I'm ready. God, I'm listening for the next step. I'm going to keep doing what you said to do, but I'm really listening for the next step. Okay, God, I'm ready. God, anytime now. Abraham, yes, here I am. He was listening for God. Now, I'll be there in a minute, God. No, the word would have been bad. No, God, I'm doing the last thing you told me to do. Don't interrupt me. A person of faith has to be listening for God when God says, "Doom, that's it. You've gone as far as I want you to go. That is, you've reached the point that I wanted you to reach. Now, turn and go this way. Stop and do this." So we have this. So yet another trademark of a faith person is always listening to the Holy Spirit. So obey God, speak God, remember God, believe God, and listen to God. So, Jill, you get that picture? So, now, years ago, I heard a guy say one time, he said, so many Christians, we sit on the spiritual fence, not of morality or right and wrong, but we sit on the spiritual fence between supernatural and natural. It's like, well, supernatural was just that 2 weeks in Acts. That supernatural doesn't really apply now. But I know that I'm not supposed to live in the natural. I'm not supposed to just be like everybody else. So I'm going to kind of sit on this fence where I'm not really supernatural and I'm not really natural. I'm kind of neither. Okay, don't be neither. You're neither super nor natural if you're sitting on the fence. Go ahead and test the supernatural waters. That sounds weird. Well, yes, it does. But there's a lot of things that are weird that are true. And so I want to encourage you to go ahead and get on the supernatural side and say, you know what? Jesus walked through walls. One of these days, I'm going to be able to walk through walls. Jesus could take a couple of fish and a couple of loaves of bread and feed 5,000 people. That sounds pretty supernatural to me. I would be okay if I could do that at the right time for the right reason for the Lord. So I just want to encourage you in that. So, okay, another Old Testament example of what I believe is supernatural faith is Shadrach, and away we go. Or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These were the guys. These were the famous firewalkers. Okay, these guys. They were told what to do by King Nebuchadnezzar, and King Nebuchadnezzar said, "Look, everybody has to. When you hear the horns, you got to bow down and you got to worship this." And somebody came to him who was jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Because why? Because the favor of God was on them and everything they did was prosperous. And it showed up the fact that these other people were not as good or as valuable to the king. So they thought, well, we're going to get rid of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because we know they won't bow. So they helped Nebuchadnezzar come up with this thing where they have to bow. And so this whole story unfolds, and here's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do. Oh, well, let me read this. Okay, so verse 19 through 26, I'll just read it to you. There won't be on the screen. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath, and his facial expression was altered towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because he'd been told no. And people in power don't like to be told no. He answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. People who are in rage will become extreme. Okay, if 1 will kill them and 2 will incinerate them, let's turn it up to 7 so that it vaporizes them, just so that even their ashes will burn. I don't want there to be a single smidge left. So here's number one thing. This is a side thing, and this kind of goes with Steve, you and I's conversation about rage. So he answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it usually was heated. Then he commanded certain valiant warriors who were in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in order to cast them into the furnace of blazing fire. Now, I got to tell you, that he would not have had to have bound them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you're not going to bow to me? Get in the fiery furnace. They would have walked in. I firmly believe they would have walked in. When I was a freshman at Samford University, everybody gets thrown in the fountain in January, and they all, there's horror stories about it. They grab you like this and they do this to you, and it's just horrible. And so it came the night that little Mike Peasaw, all 130 pounds of me, was supposed to go in the fountain. And so they come to the door, and I walk to the door and I've got my towel over my shoulder. It's like, I'm ready. You not going to fight? Nope. So this big guy picks me up and he starts carrying me. And about halfway there, he sets me down. He goes, hey, you can just walk. I was like, yeah, I can. I walk. And then he picks me up very gently and he just sets me down in the water. I get back up, try myself off. I believe Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would have just said, hey, look, no reason for these valiant soldiers of yours to die. We'll walk in. But here's what happens. So he picks these valiant soldiers, Meshach and Abednego and Shadrach, and casts them into the fiery furnace. These men were tied up in their trousers, their coats, their caps, and their other clothes. Apparently, Nebuchadnezzar wanted all of them gone. And they were cast in the midst of the furnace ablaze. For this reason, because the king's command was so urgent and the furnace had been made extremely hot, the flame of fire slew those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Point number 2 for rage people. It will cost you something a lot more than you're going to gain when you just go